I wanted to welcome Dixie Stanforth, Dr. Dixie Stanforth.
Soon to be.
We can proclaim it now as part of ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Exercise Science and Sports Medicine video series. So thanks for taking the time to visit.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I was honored when I saw the invitation.
We're here in your hometown of Austin.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to start out a little bit about your background, your early career, your early training. I think someone said you were at the University of Arizona for a while, which I almost went there to do my master's degree.
Okay.
It's a beautiful place. So anyhow, how did you get to where we're at here today?
Okay, well, before Arizona, so I did my undergraduate degree at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. I'm from Virginia, so it was in-state school for me, and I'm fortunate to have gotten a great education there. Although back then, what's interesting is, you know, it was all physical education. Yeah. And so I got an undergraduate degree in physical education, and one of our coaches there really encouraged me to go to graduate school, and she had done her master's work at the U of A in Tucson, and that was one of the schools that she encouraged me to apply to. And really, I'm so impressed with students these days because they go and they meet faculty, and there's the web, so they do their homework. Yeah. And I applied only to 2 schools, Colorado and Arizona, and pretty much flipped a coin when I got assistantships at both of them, saying, do I want to be tan or go skiing? And I just think, you know, it's embarrassing. But, I help my students see that it's so much easier for them to really look into what these programs have to offer.
Fred Roby there then?
Fred was still there, Dr. Roby to me at that time. And really the person who was most influential for me was Jack Wilmore. Oh. And so Jack, the first day I was on campus, I didn't know anybody. And I was walking through the labs, but, you know, I've never been in a lab like this before, and this nice man tours me through and invites me to help with the adult fitness program and was the kindest person. And I'm just thinking, you know, graduate school is going to be wonderful. I started working in the adult fitness program with Phil Stanforth that summer, and Jack was just tremendous and really has mentored me all of these years. He was one of the first people, once I finished my PhD.
So you knew something about ACSM probably real soon.
Well, Jack encouraged all of us as graduate students to join ACSM, and I'd never been to Las Vegas, and that was where the regional meeting was. So really, graduate students carpooled up there, and as a first-year graduate student, attended a regional ACSM meeting. And it was
what time period is this?
This was 81.
Okay.
This was 1981, and I remember hearing this big debate. I think it was Bray, and I can't remember who else, about lactic acid, and they were just into it. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, I just learned that this is how it works, and these guys are ready to, you know, have come to blows about lactic acid. So I was really, from the very beginning, thanks to Jack and other influential faculty members like Dr. Roby, really encouraged that, you know, ACSM is a professional organization, and I've been a part of it ever since I was first a graduate student.
Well, now you were there in, what, a couple years? Or?
So their program was, I finished it in a year and a half, and ended up working in Tucson, and married Phil Stanforth. And when Jack was offered his position here in Austin, part, I think, of his deal was he brought Phil, who they had worked together with the fitness program in Tucson. He was able to make the arrangements for Phil to come here to UT Austin, and I was fortunate enough to get a faculty position as well. Fantastic. So I've been teaching at the University of Texas since '85.
Wow,
so,
nice. Yeah, and that's worked out well, obviously.
You know, for me, it's been a perfect match, because while Jack encouraged me back then, it was probably partly how I performed in classes maybe, but at that time, he really said, you can do everything you want to do with a master's degree. And it was true back then, but our field has grown so tremendously that I think people like myself, we are moving more towards the need to have the PhD.
Yeah. What would you say your master's was in? Was it exercise physiology?
My
or
master's
what?
was in exercise science, was
Sure.
the actual degree title. And then for me, I've really, because of my interest in personal training and exercise, I did some research over the years at UT. They've been so supportive, even though I just have a master's degree. I was able to publish a number of papers and look at different types of exercise training when they first came out: step training, stability ball training.
And to sort of research them, analyze them,
Yeah, and
see
publish
whether
papers,
this is good,
present them,
bad?
present
Okay.
them at ACSM and other places. And you know, as I realized that the PhD really was the next step before I retired, I went more multidisciplinary, because for me, in the fitness industry, recognizing that we have been pretty spectacularly unsuccessful in the years I've been in the fitness industry at getting people to change their behaviors. Our message is not complicated: eat less, move more. And
Compliance.
yeah,
is the
getting
issue.
people
Yeah.
to do that. And we have a strong department of advertising at UT, and advertisers are very good at getting people to change their behavior. So my PhD is in advertising with an emphasis in health communication.
Oh, great
And
idea.
so marrying the fitness and the whole exercise science field with more of the messaging and how to change behavior
Great
is
idea.
where I headed.
Yeah, and we need, that's what we need. I mean, knowing what to do and getting someone to do it is a whole different
Oftentimes two very different
ballgame. Yeah,
things.
great decision, it
Yeah.
seems to me.
Yeah, so
When you're at UT then, when you first got there, and you've been there now a long time, what kinds of things were you teaching? Were you teaching teachers to teach?
and back in the day,
Or-
that was really an important part of our field. So
Yeah,
yes, I was initially hired, I taught a lot of activity classes, and then that evolved over time to more preparing people to be able to be fitness leaders in our industry. We have since expanded the program where we have specializations in personal training, and we have an academic curriculum.
Oh, okay, for
in-
undergrads.
For
that can
undergraduate
basically
students.
major in this. so to
Exactly.
speak.
So,
Okay.
so they might major in health promotion and fitness, or even general kinesiology.
Great idea.
but
Rather than the PE that you and I went through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're interested in working one-on-one with
Fantastic.
people, more strength and conditioning, or personal training for special populations. So we've developed an academic curriculum that really, I think, does a great job with that. We've been very successful in placing our students in, you know, with an undergraduate degree,
Yeah.
even finding jobs in Austin, but our other students who have excelled are the ones who've gone on to physical therapy, to medical school, because what they learn is how to communicate fitness.
Nice,
And that, I think, has always been a weak link, is I can take a multiple choice test and I can explain how fat burning works on a Scantron, but how do I have that conversation with somebody and explain what that fat burning button on the elliptical means, and how the science really has been a little bit misinterpreted when we talk about fat burning among the general population. So I think that that's one of the strong points of our program, is that we really focus on, we use personal training as a vehicle, but it's really about communicating about exercise.
So these are people.
Yes.
I mean, they've got to be able to talk to people
Well,
and explain
yeah.
what's going on. And
I
which
would
is
argue
what
that
you need.
most people need to be able to communicate
Yeah.
in their field. And so,
Pick any field.
so
right?
my bias is, it doesn't matter what your major is, if you can do this, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And so I really I use personal training as a vehicle, but it's really all about how do you communicate what you do, and really be able, can you explain it to the person on the bus who doesn't have a degree in exercise science in a way that they can get.
What is the size of this program then? Do you have 100 students?
Oh, it's
200?
much
What-
larger
you-
than that, I believe. Yeah,
Wow.
so perhaps we could get some numbers, but it's the Department of Kinesiology and Health Education. So it's an umbrella department, and we have biomechanics, we have sports science, we have aging with Juanine Sperduso.
Oh, yeah,
You know, we've got health education, we have Jan and Terry with sport history and culture.
Yeah.
So it's not eclectic, but it's really the umbrella term
Yeah,
is
that's a great
kinesiology
idea.
and health education. And really, you know, all of these students are drawn to, you know, fitness in some way.
So there's probably a core group of classes that everybody takes, and then they can more specialize into these different
Exactly,
areas.
and that's a recent change. We now have these required classes, departmental wide. So I teach, along with Phil, kinesiology 310, which is the physiological basis of conditioning. It's an introductory class, overview, vocabulary that you need across all of these areas. But there are some courses like that now that everybody takes, but really you pick one of these niche areas, and that's where the concentration of your coursework comes from.
Oh, that's exciting. That's a neat program.
Yeah, I think John Ivey has done a tremendous job at developing this over time, and it's really evolved into, I think, a powerful program because of the breadth of the offerings.
Yeah, I've followed it a little bit because of Jan and Terry, and John and I did our PhDs together at Maryland. So I've known these people a long time, and it's been a model program.
Yes, and they've just done a fabulous job with it. I've been fortunate to get to be, the implementer of some of their vision.
Yeah. So you keep saying the fitness industry and so forth, which is really what I want to get to, and you've done a lot. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about your things you're doing outside of the context of your faculty appointment at UT, and particularly how it intersects with ACSM, the Fitness Summit, those sorts of things.
Well, so I am fortunate in that while maybe from the academic standpoint, it hasn't been not a good thing to not have a PhD, but with a master's degree, really, I've been a practitioner, and so I evolved from doing a lot of group exercise, like many people in our industry, to doing quite a bit of personal training. And so I have a personal training business here in Austin where I go into people's homes, and I don't do contract training where a lot of people like myself might go to a gym and they train clients there. My client base is a little bit different, and I've been fortunate to be able to put gyms in their homes. And so I go to them and I develop programs for them. And for me, it's really been important to do personal training and not just teach about doing personal training. I think it's made me a much better teacher. And because of, I think, that ability to put into practice what I know should work, I basically run experiments all the time with clients, and I figure out what works, what doesn't work. It's helped me keep my pulse on the finger of what's going on in the fitness industry, and really stay engaged at that level and not just the academic level. So it's been very beneficial to me to actually have this personal training job, and I think it's strengthened my association with ACSM that I've been able to somewhat bridge that gap between academia and being able to talk to the people who come to, say, the Health and Fitness Summit. They want to hear what works and what the latest science says, but sometimes the scientist may not be the best person to deliver that message. And so being able to implement some of the best practices and in my own business and see what works, what doesn't work, and certainly you'll get it through my filter and my grid. But we just presented this morning here in the Austin Summit a vertical core training presentation. And so since we're in Austin, I've tried to connect, as I always do, with some of the really smart people in Austin. So I was working with one of the guys from Train for the Game. We do quite a bit of work together. I learn from them, they learn from me. And then this afternoon, I'm presenting a sphygmomanometer session. And when you submit something like that to ACSM, they're thinking blood pressure cuffs, and we're using them to assess core stability.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
So with a manual physical therapist who's here in Austin, who I have a good working relationship with. So I think for me, the connection with ACSM, while it probably was birthed out of an academic relationship, it's been greatly strengthened by the fact that I'm also a practitioner.
Yeah, which I gather from talking to Larry Golding and Ed Howley and so forth was really the intent of the summit from day one.
Exactly.
Is to make that jump or connect the two.
Yes, and
the science with the practical.
Exactly, and I think I've attended many of the annual meetings that are the research-based sessions, and yet it would be much easier for me to skip that compared to skipping this.
Yes.
Because of my emphasis is much more towards the practice as opposed to the research of science. Even now that I will be able to put the PhD after my name, I really still see this as being more of my home, because my passion is about helping people who are doing it in the field, and bridging that is a challenging bridge to cross sometimes, and yet a vital one if we want to get our message of what is really best practice and effective and efficacious practice doesn't get lost in the translation to the people who are really out there and doing it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, looking at this over time, and my background was sort of similar to yours, is that what I've seen is when I was in physical education and health education and so forth, it was the education. I mean, we were thinking that we were all going to sort of do our thing in education. And I think what you've been talking about, and what I see now with the exercises medicine movement, and Bob Salas and people like that, is that it's moving it now from education towards healthcare, and more in this broader thing of public health rather than just education. And it seems that it's opening it up to more than just school kids.
Yes, I think it's broadened tremendously beyond the educational sphere.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could just comment on that in your experience. I guess the idea would be that, you have your health clubs and you have your fitness clubs, or whatever you want to call them. It seems like more people now are taking advantage of this.
Well, I think that there are greater opportunities. And certainly within the world of fitness, we would like to hope that. I'm not sure how successful we've been at getting all that many people to buy into the whole preventive aspect of exercise, which is a powerful message that's been delivered numerous times here at this session. But we tend to kind of shuffle the same 10% around among these new, interesting, fun activities and think, oh, isn't this wonderful? But it's really the same people who are not, now they're not doing step, but they're trying beaming and they're doing this. So I think what's incumbent upon us in the years to come is much more looking at preparing the people who are on the front lines, like the trainers who come to this particular meeting, to the Health and Fitness Summit, and the physical therapists who come to the Health and Fitness Summit. We're the ones who are really interfacing with that general population, and oftentimes I think if we can get the message to that group of individuals, that there is a chance to really begin to have a much broader impact.
And that's where your communications is going to come in handy.
Exactly.
Yeah, to get beyond that 10%.
Exactly. And, because that 10% is going to exercise probably no matter what. And it's the messaging to the larger population, larger in more ways than one, that we're trying to reach, not just the numbers of them, but the size of them, and just the concern about obesity as a major concern, and the associated, disease conditions that are linked to that. But we don't talk well to those people, I think, as a profession.
At dinner last night, there was a group of us, most of your faculty, actually. And they said, what we need for what you're is something like don't mess with Texas. And they were saying, how successful that was. That wouldn't it be nice if we could come up with something like that for exercise?
Yes, and it would be nice. However, I think we have a pretty catchy tagline that is simple like that. Eat less, move more, is not complicated.
That's good.
What Don't Mess with Texas has going for it is law. Is there's legislation.
If you
so
litter, you're going to get
you
fined.
get a ticket. And so if we could put a scale at the entry counters of a fast food place, and you walked up and stepped on it, and up appeared, here's what you get to order, you might have better compliance.
Or if you
from
don't
people.
get off that couch today,
Exactly.
you're going to be fined, right?
Exactly. So I think, when you look at bringing about change at a public, when you're talking about public policy almost, it's easier to implement. You know, seatbelts would be another good example. Until there was some type of fine associated with seatbelts, drinking and driving is a similar thing. So when you try to
cell phones.
Yeah, exactly. When you try to drive behavior change and there isn't legislation to back it up, it's a much more challenging proposition, and you got to be way better at your messaging when there's not a law forcing you to do it. And so that becomes our challenge, I think. Taglines are great, but it's oftentimes those other promotions work because there's legislative teeth behind them.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah. People aren't going to do it probably unless they have to do it, or they're going to be fined
Well,
or something.
I think that's our challenge in the years ahead is, you know, is there a way to drive that desire to prevent disease, prevent obesity? Oftentimes, John Bartholomew may have been at that dinner last night. He's one of our sports psychologists, and I love the way he says it, that the negatives associated with exercise are all front-end loaded. It hurts, you sweat, you give up time.
They're all immediate.
And they're loaded onto the front end. But the back end benefits are the powerful benefits that we tend to focus on, and we may need to shift our focus towards addressing those front-loaded problems that people associate with exercise, because the cost and the pain is pretty immediate. Oftentimes the benefits, lowered blood pressure, weight loss, improved health, happen at the back end of it.
And if you and he need to get together.
I know, I love John, he's
campaign.
Wonderful. And if we could bring the front and the back end closer together, then we
somewhere.
might actually accomplish something.
Have you been associated with the journal?
I have been. I've been fortunate to be invited to be one of the, on the editorial board. And it's always exciting to me to have an email that invites me to,
I was thinking you did a column or something.
No, I've not done
you
a
haven't
column. I've been in school for the last 3 years, and so that's no columns. I've written a few. But I've been actually, I've written a couple of articles that have been published and have been so impressed with the peer review process, and very thrilled to be a part of that peer review process in terms of providing feedback about articles that have been submitted. I am amazed at the level of peer review that goes into this journal, and I think that it's definitely, Ed Howley has been the editor when I've been associated with the journal, and he has just done an amazing job to raise the level of quality that appears in every single publication.
Yeah, I talked with Ed this morning a good bit about the workings of it, the inner workings of it, and so forth. And one of the points he was making, which I wanted to ask you about, is that, and he didn't say it, I said, this is really good. I mean, I read this on the bus. I really like it because I can understand it too. And
that's a good thing.
and he said that, well, you know, what we're working on now is how to get it to more people.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that, or if you've already talked to him. I guess you had him. Maybe you were at the meeting this morning.
I was not actually, but.
But he said we were trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
But it seems to me you have a good message. It's a good journal, and you got to get it out to more people.
Right.
And maybe part of your communications thing, you can figure that out.
Yeah, perhaps. I do think that the challenge for the Health and Fitness Journal is that I believe that you need to be a member to get it.
You did mention that, yes. You have to check the little box and maybe pay more.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for example, my co-presenters here in Austin, she belongs to a number of physical therapy organizations. She loves reading this, but to get it, to pay the dues to be a member, I think that's a barrier that's really high for some people. The strength and conditioning coach who presented with me, he belongs to a different professional organization. So perhaps lowering the barriers would be a way that, you know, if you're a member of an associated or affiliated professional group, that you might be able to you know, open access to it at a reduced cost. I think that you could look at some options like that.
And you just can't go to the magazine stand and get it either.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like Shape or something like that.
Right. Although I really do think that that the media writers, you know, I do a number of interviews regularly with freelancers, and you know how that works. They call you up and they need an answer right away because their deadline's 2 hours from now. And I think a lot of them use that this journal to get ideas for stories
find
and to
experts.
exactly and to connect with people who might be able to communicate at this level where they're not going to pick up the phone and call the person who did, you know, maybe a project that involved blood or muscle biopsy.
Yeah, or somebody in the lab.
Exactly. But if they can get a hold of someone who can actually communicate at this level, then there's a better chance that they can communicate at a level that their readers
Yes.
could potentially understand.
That's a good plan. And you've, I thought, have done at least one book.
I have done
Maybe
one,
more, I
no,
don't know.
no, one book a number of years ago, and it's more of a textbook. Although I'm always amazed, I get these little, very little royalty checks, but it was titled Aerobic Dance Exercise, and we wrote it for people probably at colleges who are teaching group exercise classes, but I am amazed at how many people use it in other classes because I think we did a really good job of explaining exercise. And some, you know, from a communication perspective, we took some complicated things and we made them readable and understandable in a way that could be incorporated into an educational setting. So continue to get surprisingly positive feedback about it.
Well, that's good. Well, I guess we're almost out of time,
Okay.
but I just had sort of one final question, and that is, where do you think we're at in the big picture? You know, as far as, you know, we've got the summits, we have the journal, we have the annual meeting, and I'm saying we, I mean, so the sort of the American College of Sports Medicine. But what I realized today is that in talking to others, there's all these other groups that I
Yes.
haven't kept up with, IDEA and whatever. Is it sort of one big happy family? Or, without getting in, and no politics meant here, but is everybody sort of trying to do the same thing? I mean, and
Yeah,
running into the same
It's a good
10% of the people? Or,
It's a good question because I think you have a finite pool of people who would attend meetings like this. And I do think that there are niche markets. And so where NSCA is going to get strength and conditioning, functional performance people, and we get some spillover here, but it's a small percentage of the attendees. So I think ACSM has done a good job of defining their market, which is probably the fitness professional who is striving for a little more knowledge, a little higher level of education, maybe has a better educational background to begin with, and their brand is really that they are recognized as a leader in the fitness industry because they have position stands that everyone recommends.
certification program.
They have their certification, and so they attract probably the higher end, not dollar end, but educational
see what you're
end, and where a lot of those people might also go to IDEA. ACSM might be their first choice because it's going to be a little bit heavier on the content as opposed to perhaps just all movement-based sessions.
Sure, I
And
see.
yet I think that that's a balance that, you know, that there really needs to be at the Health and Fitness Summit. There needs to be movement, and that
Yeah,
there
you can't
needs
just
to
do one or the other.
exactly. So I think by offering a wide spectrum of classes, the education that's offered at ACSM, I don't think is matched elsewhere. And I do think by expanding some of the movement and the exercise where you bring in people who really do know what they're doing, that they've solidified their position, that you can really get it all at this particular meeting and through this particular organization.
Yeah. I've been at not all of them, but the ones I've been to, that was sort of my takeaway thing, is that this is a nice balance between substantive lecture material
Right.
and science,
Right.
but yet hands-on stuff.
Right, science and practice.
Yeah.
And for most people, you know, who want to really excel, you need both of those things.
Right.
You need an understanding of both of those things, but it needs to be delivered in a way that you don't need a PhD to understand it.
Yeah, that's why I can read this.
I know, you and me both.
Okay, well, thank you so
Okay,
much.
you
That
are
was very
welcome.
nice of you.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure.